So much of my experience of church has been built around this expectation that all the music we sing, all the language that we use has to land emotionally for it to really count.
Confession: I am a religious person. And I know you're saying, well, that's not all that surprising. You're a minister. Of course you're religious. But the thing is, my formative experiences of faith have largely come from within what we might call the evangelical tradition. And one of the things that I've been told over and over again is that Christianity is a relationship, not a religion. Now, the first part of that, I embrace absolutely. There is a very real connection with the divine, a relationship with God that I have as a felt experience, one that I want to cultivate and develop over time. It's the second part of that phrase that bothers me, because Christianity has also very much been a religion for me, a set of practices that I participate in, a community that I choose to hold me to certain values and convictions, even when the emotions and the feelings and, let's be honest, the relationship with God that I have sometimes feels lacking. And anecdotally, I have conversations with a lot of people, both as a pastor and even here on YouTube. And a lot of people, particularly, though not exclusively men, have expressed this frustration with the lack of breadth and depth with which the Christian religion is discussed. It's often talked about in ways that are only reflective of the emotive relationship feeling side. And as beautiful as that is, I think a lot of us really resonate with the community, the conviction, the practices that hold us to certain purposes in ways that we want to live out the way of Jesus in the world. I think Christianity could do a much better job of talking to people about the full experience of what it means to follow Jesus. Some of us come into Christianity through the relationship, an encounter with the divine that shakes something inside of us. And over time, we discover the religion, the practices and the patterns that hold us here. Others of us are compelled by the practices, the rhythms, the habits, the community, the conviction, and that's our entry point. And over time, we find our hearts slowly softening to this encounter and felt experience of God in our lives. Both of these are just as valid and as important. And I think we can do a better job with our language of making all of that accessible to all of the people we encounter. And recently, I found myself talking about a conversation I had had with my son about Christianity and about all the different ways that we participate in that story.
I remember talking with my son, it was about a year ago now, and I was picking him up after school. And on that day, he had been comparing dietary practices with some of his friends in class, and I have no idea how that started, but he found out that one of his friends didn't eat bacon. And so he said to me, "Dad, we don't eat bacon because we're vegetarians, but my friend doesn't eat bacon because he's Muslim. Are Christians allowed to eat bacon?" And so I started into a bit of a history lesson about dietary restrictions and Christian practice. And I was building up to this big landing where I was going to tell him that in Christian practice, nothing that goes into you, nothing you eat can make you unclean. What matters is what comes out of you, how you treat the people around you. And he said, "I'm not interested in any of that, Dad. I just want to know if Christians can eat bacon." And I said, yes. Maybe a little deflated, I wasn't going to get to pontificate the way I wanted, but then he asked me, "Well, I'm a vegetarian, am I also a Christian?" And I realized that was the real conversation that day. And so I said to him, "Well, eventually, you'll have to decide that for yourself. That's part of the beauty of Christianity. You're never forced to be here. But until then, yeah, you are a Christian. Because that's the story, that's the tradition through which our family explores who God is and understands how God has been revealed to humans. You get to choose for yourself, but you're also part of a family and community and tradition that counts, even while you're figuring it out for yourself." And the truth is, looking back, what I realize now maybe a little bit is that I think I was saying that as much to myself as I was to my son, even at 46, even as a pastor, even as someone who has very much chosen this story for myself. My faith is both the relationship that holds me and the religion that forms me. And that's not to diminish my affinity for God. In fact, that's exactly what I want to talk about today, all of our felt experience of the divine. But I do think sometimes, at least within the evangelical tradition, our language can at times diminish the full scope of what it means to follow the way of Jesus in the world. There are times I feel very close to God. And I pray to God. I feel even like I hear from God in terms of determining my steps and guiding my choices. But perhaps the majority of what I might call my faith is really about ordering my life around the teachings of the person who I believe is the truest representation of divine character. And the closest I will ever come to understanding God this side of eternity. And the thing is, the emotion that I would associate with that expression of my faith is probably something like conviction or purpose, maybe even courage on a good day, but not necessarily the kind of romanticized emotions that often get a lot of our attention within our gathered worship experiences. Now again, don't get me wrong, it is beautiful to be caught up in a moment of worship and to raise your hands and to feel the presence of Spirit, to give yourself over to that encounter. But anecdotally, I know that for a lot of us here in this room, particularly, though not exclusively men here in this room, the felt experience of faith has often been talked about in ways that are maybe a little bit too narrow, in ways that are not fully reflective of the breadth and the depth with which the New Testament talks about our relationship to Jesus in all kinds of different ways. The thing is, I don't only feel my faith in my heart. Sometimes I do. But sometimes I feel it in my gut, or in my intellect, or in my conviction for the kind of man, the kind of person that I want to become. All of that is valid. And it's that combination that makes me feel like I can hold on to all of this for the long haul, because it's actually the breadth of experience that feels robust enough to carry me through the ups and downs in some of my emotions.